Hi everyone, my name's Greg Freeman. I'm the CEO of Data Literacy Academy, and we are joined on this video series in partnership with Andy Crossley from Oakland. And what we wanted to do was share a video series that explains how we think about the world, and hopefully it helps a lot of people.
All right, so we're into execute, the fun stuff, actually. I think for a lot of people, we're building stuff, we're delivering stuff, we're making stuff happen. My big call out though is often in execute is making sure you've remembered to go back to your original purpose, and we can measure it. We can show that what we're doing here relates back to what we set out in our define stage. So that's a really important thing. But one of the other things I think often people forget is how you balance or keep balancing the lighthouse versus foundational stuff, but making sure you're calling out the value of the foundational stuff. It's often really easy for the lighthouse because it's shiny, people can see it. But the foundational stuff's really hard to articulate a value to. So we often get asked about that in terms of our work because we do a bit of both. But I always liken it to the analogy of, like, say, a sprinter like Usain Bolt. Everybody sees Usain Bolt running 100 meters in 9.5 seconds, makes it look easy, obviously. But that's the lighthouse project. What they don't see is the training team, the nutrition team, the people that pull the training plan together, all the work that goes in the background, which is the foundational stuff. And it's hard to articulate the value, but he can't run 9.5 seconds without that. So we do a lot of work in trying to write comms and I guess packs and things like that, just to explain and articulate these value statements around foundational work. But that comes from doing the right stuff in planning. So if you've planned the right projects that combine lighthouse and foundational stuff, you can then make sure you've set out on the right pathway and execute, because you've got quick projects that do a bit of foundational, bit of lighthouse. Go, well, the reason you're all getting excited about that dashboard that shows number of customers is because we did this data governance stuff in the background that you don't really know about or care about, but that's how it works. So I don't know, comms is a big part of that. I guess that falls into some of your world a bit.
Yeah, huge. I mean, we see the whole thing really around data literacy, data culture change, transformation adoption, product adoption as a comms piece and a change management piece. So one of the groups that we bring in that planning phase actually, and really help us a lot hands-on during the execute phase, are a change management team or a transformation team or even just a PM team. But we need somebody who's in there to think about how is all this being waterfalled out to the organization, who's hearing about it, how does it keep that message and alignment clear, pulling back to that plan and the execution. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one of the things we see with the lighthouse piece, everybody sells the lighthouses as the holy grail that's going to come out of these projects, which means that actually a lot of projects that I see fail, both from a people side but also from a wider data side, are ones where people have really oversold. They've overpromised and underdelivered rather than underpromising and overdelivering. I mean, conceptually, not many people outside of data right now understand data as well as they should, and that's why we exist. So you don't really have to oversell it. You've just got to show the problems you can solve, and probably spend a bit of time when executives hear about Gen AI and big machine learning programs and all those types of things from competitors. Spend a bit of time to tell them that that's a little way off for us yet. Like, be brave, I think, is a thing that we really emphasize. And obviously educate as well. And that's where the data literacy piece comes in.
So yeah, you talk about education. One of our clients who's a telco, doing a piece of work around ownership. So to some of the exec, they don't really care or understand about ownership. And a lot of our work has been educating them on it to solve problems. So helping them understand what the problems they've got with their data, whether that's a data quality problem, or I can't get this report, or I can't view this data in this sort of way to make a decision. Right, well, we're going to help you do that through data ownership. So that's just a mechanism. It's a means to an end, rather than data ownership is the thing that we're going to talk about. We want them to talk about, well, we've solved all of these problems and I can now do X and Y and make this decision or go faster or retain more customers. That's ultimately what they care about running a business, not we've got a data ownership in place. So that becomes quite a critical element through that execution to make sure they stay on board and stay educated, I guess, through that.
Yeah, it's really interesting there as well. You said about them kind of seeing the wins and feeling the wins of whether it's data ownership or data more generally. That's something we really emphasize. So when I've said in previous bits of content around change management, we are genuinely doing everything from those leadership one-to-ones that we referred to through to building brands for the data organization, the data literacy program, like constant comms plans around how data is being used internally, externally, And those success stories are really the ones that drive not only the fact that data is a huge opportunity for the business, but if you communicate in the right way, we need to remember that data's quite hard. Like, it really is a hard thing to do. If it was easy, we wouldn't have jobs and everybody would be billionaires and every business would be making decisions based on data all the time, and it'd be great. So those are the constant messages that whether we're running events, and we do big events with people to kind of celebrate their data literacy program, or data days, or whatever we want to call them, or we're just writing articles, communicating in meetings, do remind them that it's hard, but remind them as much about the opportunity, the wins we're seeing, the good work we're doing. And I think that really translates into what we see as executing the why behind the people program and the culture program. So what we see very, very clearly is that if you don't create a meaningful why for people, they won't want to learn. I'll break everyone's hearts by saying most people in a business do not care about data right now. They don't care about the work we're doing. They don't care about the success we're seeing, because ultimately they don't understand it. And the thing that we always say is, if you don't understand something, you don't trust it. And if you don't trust it, you don't use it, which means that your execution of the bigger picture is completely pointless unless people understand it. So that's why we've got to educate them. But in order to win the opportunity to educate, we have to communicate the why, and we have to create the why. And I think that's where those wins and those successes of linking it directly to what we're trying to achieve as a data team really comes in.
That is, I really like that, the why bit. So we find sometimes in a lot of our platform build, typically we'll be working with the client's own internal tech teams, wherever they might sit. And you sometimes forget that you think they're going to know this and they've already got it figured out. Well, again, why are we there if that's true? So through Execute, one of our key principles is to make sure we do ourselves out of a job. Ultimately, we're building a capability, not a piece of technology, not a dashboard. We're building a capability. So in the same way, from your perspective, very much the end users, it might be the end users' customers, right? We also try and focus on our customer is the technology team. So how can we educate them about data? Because they're often, not always, but they're often from a technology background, not a data technology background. Subtle difference, but quite important in terms of how you run certain queries, how you set stuff up for success and performance, for example. And how you make sure that's going to outlive the project, because we're still just talking about a project. That's a finite thing, really. And so trying to set people up with a capability, not a technology, is a really key part of how we think about execution, because it's to get to that point where we can hand it over. And the same, I guess, is true for you guys. You're trying to do something so that you can leave them in a better place you found them, ultimately.
Absolutely. Within that change management plan, a bit that everybody seems to forget is about what we call the re-embedding phase, and the almost like the making it business as usual, the ways of working, the operating model. It seems a little bit foreign almost to talk about ways of working and operating models and HR policies and all those types of things when it's something as simple in inverted commas as data literacy. But when you think that actually we don't believe we sell data literacy or deliver data literacy per se, we believe we deliver data culture, transformation adoption, product adoption. All these things are going to change ways of working in ways that people probably didn't perceive actually. So if we create a data culture, the worst thing we can do, it's a great execution, we've now got a data culture within a team. If we then hire someone in who doesn't care about data, especially if it's a leadership position, and that all starts to fall apart, we've ultimately failed. So we have to look at how then data and data literacy become part of the hiring process, not in the data team, but out in core departments. So if we're testing someone in their marketing skills, are we also testing their data skills? Are we testing? So I mean, we've got a really nice, well, it's not a nice example actually. It's a bit of a tragic example where I think we met a professional services company who had done a really good job actually of getting that journey going and getting it started. And they were well on their way, technology was in place, people were starting to buy in, they were learning, they were educated, and they hired a CEO who didn't care. And that's one of the craziest things, right? Somebody coming in that senior without those ways of working, without that HR program of embedding the data culture and the data project in there, they hired somebody who ultimately has finite decision-making power within the business, and the whole thing started to fall apart because budgets started to get pulled, and And you can't afford for that to be the case. So we've got to build that really into the bigger ways of working, and that locking it in is a really key part of the change.
It's interesting that, because I think in execute, it's again trying to remember to go back to your original purpose, and have you achieved that, or are you on the way to achieving that through the execute phase? One of the things we were talking offline and behind the scenes around the sort of notion of like sales culture, and we're ultimately a customer service job. And a lot of clients we've worked with, they'll have had a sales culture that they've embedded over time, a long time. And that's not just the sales team, everybody, you've all got a role to play in sales. And it's interesting that people don't think in the same way for data. You've all got a role to play in data. So talk to the tech team, you've got a role to play, not just in building stuff, but thinking how you use data as a business, as an individual, and trying to get people to think like that as a pervasive element through execution. I think it's really important, because then that sticks almost irregardless of whether the new CEO comes in, which will create some bumps, obviously. But embedding that as a cultural thing is not just about dashboards and more technology. It's ultimately how you think and operate using data that you've got available to you.